Wow, I have got a beefy review for you guys here today. This is the Everest keyboard. It's kind of hard to call this thing a keyboard when it's more of a keyboard system. We've got a lot of unique ideas in here. We've got some vast improvements on a couple ideas you've seen before, and an overall total user experience that does a lot of things right and leaves only a few opportunities. It's also interesting in that we've had some conversation lately between like custom keyboards over here and like everything but the kitchen sink gaming keyboards over here. Well, Everest has attempted to bridge that gap. They're really trying to create a product here that is everything to everyone. And that's dangerous ground. More often than not, you find yourself alienating both markets. But Everest actually manages to pull this off to a pretty staggering degree. We're going to talk about why. You ready? Let's go! Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching BadSeed Tech, and today we're looking at the Everest keyboard from Mountain. Full transparency, Mountain did send these units out for the purposes of this review, but as you should know by now, doesn't affect my review in any way. So pricing on the Everest can run anywhere from $129.99 to $309.99, depending on how you have it configured, and there's a lot to talk about. At the heart of the Everest is the core, which is in pre-order right now for bare bones at $129.99, or in the pre-built variant starting at $149.99. The core is a TKL, available in either black or gunmetal colorways. It's hot swap, available currently in US ANSI and Spanish ISO layout with your choice of 5 flavors of Cherry MX. I have silent reds in one of these and regular reds in the others. Silent reds do come with a $10 upcharge here. Standard, it comes with ABS keycaps, and these are not high-end double shot ABS or anything. These are very low-tier spray painted shine through ABS that are really prone to fingerprints and oil. You can upgrade to Taihao PBT for a $30 upcharge. An important note here is that if you do decide to go for the $30 PBT upgrade for the Taihao on the core, you don't just get enough keys to cover the TKL. You get a complete 104 key set. So if you do decide to add the numpad later, you're covered with PBT there as well. Because customization is such a big factor with this board, I really can't shake the feeling that these cheap ABS caps are included simply as a placeholder so that you can upgrade these to whatever you want later, which is made easier by the fact that this thing is a standard layout all the way around. The board itself is 2 sandwich plates of brushed aluminum on top of a plastic base. There is a diffuser plate in between the 2 aluminum layers, so you have 360-degree RGB. It's obvious they've really tried to diffuse the individual LEDs as much as possible. It's still pretty obvious where they're located, but it achieves a better effect than like a drop, alt, or a control. The keypad itself is this circular milled texture. Love it or hate it, it looks really unique. It does show oil and fingerprints as well, as this pattern is milled right into the top aluminum plate that also has that brushed outer edge. Underneath, you have loads of cable routing channels and the main USB-C connection. The first thing I noticed with where the connector is situated is that it could present a challenge for aftermarket cables depending on how you have your cable configured. You get 3 long rubber strips across the front as well as 2 round disc feet in the rear. So the height adjust is handled with these magnetic discs, which you stack to achieve your desired height. This may seem a little janky at first glance, but I promise these things are very strong. Having the feet come off the board when moving it in any direction is not a factor at all. These are very solid. You'll also notice these USB-C ports along the sides and the top of the board. These are there to support the accessories we're about to talk about. They serve no other purpose that I can find. So sadly, you can't plug like a card reader or anything else into these and use it as a pass-through. Because the board itself functions as a hub though, you do still get a USB-A port on top that allows functionality for USB pass-through. And you also still get the detachable cable. I don't think I've ever seen any sort of pass-through support on a board with a detachable cable. It's thicker than most, but this is still a solid W. It does have its own control software as well. It's called Basecamp. We looked at it recently when we looked at their lightweight mouse. I've had 0 issues with this since the last update though. It's really robust. We'll cover the individual features as we go through the various hardware points, but you should know it's got per key RGB, of course. It's got loads of animation as well as 5 profiles you can store on the board, unlimited profile storage on the PC. While it doesn't support layers that I can find, you can reassign basically every key on layer 1. Everything feels really good, fleshed out, easy to use. Nothing feels OEM in any way. RGB looks good. It's more of a subdued effect. You're not going to get a crazy bright reflection off that backplate. Again, with these caps, the way the legends are positioned here, it's one of the few boards that on like the number row, the alternate legends are lit well, but the actual numeric legends not so much. This comes down to the caps themselves and not the LEDs on the PCB. The actual typing experience, really solid. The board itself is built extremely well. I'd go so far as to call it overbuilt. It sounds like there's solid dampening as well inside this case. Stabilizers feel and sound great. They are hand lubed from the factory. Of course, if you do want to replace them, you can easily, as the board is hot swap. You will be limited to plate mount stabs though. Disappointingly, the hot swap sockets here only have support for plate mount switches. If there's one thing this board really got wrong for me, it's this right here. I'm never a fan of clipping my nice switches. You will hear a little ping in the board, but I can confirm it's only coming from the switches. Tested with my clip Xylets, the board sounds solid. It's also really stable, feels really premium to type on. Moving now to the Cadillac bells and whistles config for this board finds us at the Everest Max, and this is where you start to see some of the magic of this keyboard. 3 accessories join the core to make the Max, the first being the small faux leather palm rest, they call it. That's actually pretty accurate. It fastens with magnets to the board as well, but it doesn't extend out far enough from the board for me to comfortably use it as a wrist rest. It's comfy though. Those of you with smaller hands may get some use out of this, but those of you with larger hands may find yourself looking for a little more depth. Nothing really to write home about here. Next up is the media dock. This is like a little pill-shaped add-on that offers dedicated media controls, indicator LEDs, and a round display module with a notched tactile plastic wheel. I think this is what Corsair was trying to do on the K100, but the implementation feels and looks much better here. The wheel is solid, feels really good in hand. The screen looks great, really strong brightness and saturation from every viewing angle. This offers basic control functionality of the board, as well as either a digital or analog clock setting, not to mention system specs. You can even upload your own image for use as the screensaver, and the resolution here is surprisingly good. You can even change the color of the menu indicator. Selection's done with the button right next to the screen. Backing out of any menu is simply a double tap. This entire module is also configured to be on the left or the right side of the board, and it's hot swap. You just pull it off and place it on whatever side you want. Takes a second, pops right back on. I mentioned the indicator LEDs because if you decide on a configuration that doesn't include the media dock, you can still activate indicators in the Basecamp software that function for the core version of the board, like caps lock and scroll lock. The downside here is that they're either lit solid white or totally off, so the aesthetic doesn't really play well with whatever lighting scheme you have set up. But the crown jewel of this system is the numpad. It carries the same style, build, and design language of the main board. What makes this so special is that it too can be completely removed when you don't need it, or you can move it from the right side of the board to the left with this attachment system. The slider on the back extends a USB-C connector with a magnet mount top and bottom and a little extension bar on the bottom that also has a magnetic attachment. To my knowledge, the ROG Claymore was really the first keyboard to try this swappable numpad thing. Now, I've never used that board, but I've heard through the grapevine that the implementation there is not very solid. I don't even know if they're still producing that board at all. What I can say about the implementation here is that it's 95% solid. Here's what I mean. When it's on the desk, it's solid. You can use that numpad all day. It is super solid. Feels like it's part of the keyboard. You can slide the keyboard around on the desk, still feels solid. But you can't pick up the whole board from the sides as you would normally pick up a full-size board. It does this. And if you do manage to pick up the board top and bottom, it's left kind of dangling off the side in a way that definitely feels like you're going to break it. You won't actually break it, trust me, I tried, but it looks, sounds, and feels like you're going to. The seams match up pretty well when it's lying on the desk. If you specifically try to press on certain areas, you will get some movement, but if you're content to simply use it as intended, I didn't have any issues. I really struggle to think how they even would have improved this functionality. The only thing I could come up with is if that lower extension bar somehow inserted itself a little further into the keyboard. Now, that's just me coming up with that off the top of my head. I'm sure the engineer behind this thought of that a million times over and could explain to me in great detail why that wasn't an option. The amount of thought and detail that went into this board is staggering. You also get these crystal clear tactile buttons up here that mirror a Stream Deck. These are handy for general macros, program launching, basic system functions, and you can change the displays in here as well. They feel really good and they look similar to a Stream Deck, but it's important to note that they don't have any sort of functionality for OBS or any functionality you would normally associate with a Stream Deck. Just the look. Mountain has told me they have plans for increased functionality not only for these 4 buttons but for the media dock as well, but at this point no conversation about specific API support or anything like stream control related. The numpad is also hot swap as well in terms of moving it around on the board. The sockets themselves are also hot swap, and if for some reason you don't want it attached to the board, they also provide this jumper cable so you have some flexibility in positioning. It simply connects the numpad to the keyboard. Very important note here that the numpad will not function independently as a standalone device. It has to be connected to the Everest core to function. Some of you may be put off by the rounded corners on both units because they don't come together to completely touch and create that straight line across. This was a design language choice from Mountain, and you'll see evidence of that rounded corner, pill-shaped design everywhere you look on the board. I think that about covers it for features and functionality. Talking about pricing and value, there's a lot to unpack here. And speaking of unpacking, I do want to touch briefly on the unboxing experience because it certainly was an experience. The Max arrives in less of a box and more of like a cardboard dresser where you get the board and the wrist rest and the top section and then pull out this drawer in the bottom that has individual boxes for each of the components as well as the manual plus the accessories kit that has demos of each Cherry MX switch, the extra disc risers for the feet, a double-sided keycap and switch puller, and the cables. Again, they do participate with plastic bank, but this has to be some of the most extravagant packaging I've ever seen, and it definitely raises some questions about how much it adds to the overall unit cost. So looking at pricing on the core, I'm not terribly put off by the bare bones price at $130 because the board itself is really solid. Really well built. With the included ABS keycaps here being so throwaway, that $150 price point gets a little tougher to talk about, especially when you factor in the $30 cost of upgrading to the Taihao PBT caps. Now what you have is a $180 TKL board with hot swap without 5-pin support. To me, that's not a move you want to make unless you intend to embrace all the functionality, all the capabilities of the system. It stings a bit more when you consider the wrist rest as a $15 upcharge. This definitely feels like it should have been included with the core. It's nothing special. The media dock as a standalone is $69.99. It's a cool feature, but it is really tough to justify the cost of that as well to add dedicated media keys, alternate indicator LEDs, and the screen. For me, where I start to see the value is in the numpad functionality because there's a lot to be said for transitioning from a work-based situation into a gaming situation simply by removing your numpad and placing it out of the way. It also allows for left or right-handed support. The fastening implementation isn't perfect, but it's a better situation than anything I've seen. Then take into account that this keyboard doesn't feel like a big brand flagship gaming keyboard. This thing is built, and despite being limited to plate mount, it still offers hot swap and easy access to the stabs, which are arguably the best factory stabs I've ever seen. The software is really detailed, it's well laid out, it's easy to use, it's updated frequently. It's not a perfect keyboard. The lack of 5-pin support is a major oversight here. This thing is a fingerprint magnet virtually anywhere where you can touch the board, and the included ABS keycaps are offensively poor at this price point. But the innovation here, the build quality, the customization, the ability to relocate key components really does the best job of straddling the line between a full-featured gaming keyboard and a custom keyboard that I've seen. For the Max configuration, if you go with a speed or a silent switch and the PBT upgrade, you're looking at a grand total of $309.99. The smart money is on skipping the switch upgrade and the PBT upgrade and doing your own switches and caps. Then you're looking at $270 for the full experience. Depending on your needs, there's an argument that the smartest money is probably going with the bare bones core and adding the numpad. That gets you to $210. But even that $270, as expensive as that sounds, offers a tremendous amount lot more than you get in a K100 at $230 and more than you'd get ignoring wireless in the G915 at $250. Any way you slice it, it's expensive. So I'm not gonna sit here and say this is a must-have keyboard, but if you've been looking for a solution like this for your numpad, chances are you're already really excited about getting your hands on this. The Everest represents real innovation and quality from a small company, and I have to applaud that. As always, links down in the description for everything that we talked about today. Any questions, hit me in the comments or come find me on Twitter. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.